The CEOs of Facebook, Twitter, and Google will appear before federal lawmakers later today for a hearing on Section 230 of the 1996 Communications Decency Act. This Section 230 protects these social media companies from lawsuits. They've got no liability for third-party posts on their platforms. Joining me right now is Mississippi Senator, Commerce Committee Chairman for today's hearing, Roger Wicker. Senator, it's great to have you this morning. Thanks very much for joining us. Can you lay out what we're going to see today and tell us what you're expecting from these CEOs?
Maria, there is concern on the right and the left about the power of these big tech companies. And who we're going to have today as witnesses, the CEOs of Google, Twitter, and Facebook, are among the most powerful people in the country, if not the most powerful people on the planet. If you control the flow of news, if you control the flow of information, you are indeed powerful. And so I think there are concerns from Republicans and Democrats about the power of these big tech companies and the fact that they have a special liability protection that you don't have as a journalist, and the press doesn't have, but they have a special protection under the Communications Decency Act, which you pointed out, Section 230, and so I think we'll be asking questions about that.
Yeah, so how much of this will also include the tech bias that we see, Senator? Because we know that, for example, this morning, we've got this, huge story, this blockbuster evidence that Hunter Biden was doing big deals with these companies across the world, holding money for his father, then sitting vice president, if these emails are right. We had a major interview last night with Bobulinski. Mr. Bobulinski was the partner of Hunter Biden, and he told us that this is also about Joe Biden. And social media is suppressing that. By the way, you haven't seen any stories about it in the New York Times. Never mind Twitter and Google and Facebook. But what about the suppressing of this information? How does that play into all of this, Senator?
Well, it's actually being suppressed everywhere. I've watched every minute of that interview last night with Tucker Carlson. Also, I flipped on 7 o'clock to Network News, and somehow that interview never happened. That story doesn't exist. So there's certainly a bias in as far as the media goes across the board. It happens, we issued these subpoenas on October 1st before the New York Post story about the laptop and the Bidens, before that broke. And so I think this gives us a good opportunity to explore really the outrageous conduct of Twitter in not only blocking this story, keeping Twitter users from retweeting it, but also if someone tried to do so, Twitter actually went the further step of shutting down that participant altogether, shutting their Twitter account.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be at all surprised if we had questions about that today. But get ready for chapter and verse of examples as to these big companies who have a special liability protection really being in the tank for one side. Those questions will come from our side. The Democrats have other concerns. And I would point out, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, Joe Biden and Donald Trump have advocated the complete repeal of this section. I have some amendments in my bill that I've introduced with Chairman Graham. But both nominees from major parties for the presidency of the United States have said this section should be repealed entirely. We'll be talking about that today also.
Well, it's true. On both sides of the aisle, people have recognized that these technology giants hold an enormous amount of power globally in the spread of news and information. I mean, I guess when the Section 230 was written, it wasn't assumed that these companies would have the power that they have today. So would you go a step further and advocate that they should be split up? I mean, look at Google. Google has 90% market share in search. Most people want to see competition, right? You want to see competition change the situation. You want to see capitalism at its best. But where's the competitors? Where are the alternatives to Google when you want to do a search? 90% market share? Do you think we'll see these companies get split up?
You're talking antitrust, and the Justice Department is very much involved in that. I will say that there may be questions about that today. Such matters really come before Senator Graham's committee, the Judiciary Committee. But yes, I think it's a fair question to ask. I think we'll be asking them, can't we at least agree that Section 230 should be amended so that it's clear? Right now, if these big platforms deem something to be objectionable, they can shut it down. Now, to me, objectionable is like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. And what may be objectionable to Jack Dorsey at Twitter, I might think is just fine and actually good journalism and good inquiry. So we need to take that term out and be more specific under Section 230 about what they are allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do.
Yeah. I mean, they tag President Trump a lot. Lots of stuff that he says, they tag it. They say, you know, you got to go through extra steps to see it. Meanwhile, they've got the Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran tweeting like mad as they're saying, you know, death to America in Iran. So there's that, Senator. Look, I got to get your take on the races and where we are. We're 6 days away from Election Day. Control of the Senate is up for grabs with the race tightening in many states. Will Republicans maintain control of the Senate? How are you feeling about these races?
I think it's very tight. You know, I was chairman of the Senate campaign committee 4 years ago. It was tight at that time. We went into Election Day realizing if our folks turned out, we would hold the majority. And indeed, President Trump won a surprising victory, and we held on to the Senate. I think things are trending in the right direction in Arizona with Martha McSally. I think Joni Ernst looks better and better in Iowa, and so we're feeling good across the board. I think North Carolina will end up Tuesday night in the Republican column with Tom Tillis. So I'm feeling pretty good, but it depends on who votes and how they vote and how we turn them out.
Senator, real quick before you go, do you have any knowledge in terms of what the plans are on the other side should they take the Senate majority? For example, someone told me that the plans are to have Bernie Sanders be the chairman of the Budget Committee. Any other nuggets that you can share with us in terms of plans that you've heard should they take control of the Senate in terms of who'll be in charge where?
Well, let me just say, listeners out there should be aware of the sea change that would occur in the United States Senate if Chuck Schumer is majority leader. And this includes everything from doing away with the greatest consensus building technique we've ever had, and that's the filibuster, to packing the court to the officers that would be chairman of committee. It's something to think about, and I think our voters and people, your viewers this morning need to look at that.
Senator, it's good to see you this morning. Thank you so much. We'll be watching your hearing this morning on Big Tech. Senator Roger Wicker joining us in Washington.